All right, welcome. All right, welcome back. Our session now is, as people are coming in, I'm looking at the numbers. Our session now is about another area of diversity and inclusion that is growing and is often underrepresented in conferences and research. So we are going to hear from our partners from Willis Towers Watson consultancy, and Stacy Greenfield will lead a conversation with Pratin Shah about the practices that they have established at Willis Towers Watson and share their experience. And without further ado, Stacy, Pratin, can't wait to hear what you've done. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Anna.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. An honor to be here. Thank you. So
All right.
I think.
Go ahead, Pratin.
Yep, you can see the screen and everything. I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think I'm going to kick it off and then we're going to get right into the content. We prepared a short presentation, but hopefully this is all about just our experiences as we continuously focus on at Willis Towers Watson to create sort of an inclusive culture, representation of across all different backgrounds and colleagues. We want to share some of our insights, sort of our framework and how we've continuously committed to making sure, we focus on providing services to our very important clients using our best talent. So let me know when. So just a quick intro, Pratin Shah, I'm a managing director in our benefit outsourcing practice within Willis Towers Watson, focused on client and operations management, located based out of New Jersey, 25 years in sort of the industry. And I also sit on Willis Towers Watson North America Inclusion and Diversity Council. So our council is responsible for setting goals and priorities for all of our geography and lines of business.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Greenfield. I'm also with Willis Towers Watson, and I'm part of our global inclusion and diversity team. And so I get the opportunity to work with Pratin on programs like our Autism at Work, as well as our inclusion networks and our inclusion and diversity councils around the globe. Next slide. So let's dig into the content because we don't have a lot of time, and this is a very broad topic. And so we're going to just give you a small sliver, and we'd love to hear questions from you at the end. So, please feel free to either ask us along the way or we'll have that Q&A at the end. So we wanted to start by defining neurodiversity. And, for us, neurodiversity is an aspect of diversity that enhances the workplace in a number of different ways. So people with neurocognitive disabilities, they have talents, perspectives, and skills that really can be beneficial to many work environments. But there is a lot of terminology around neurodiversity, and I thought it would be helpful to define some of those terms. And there's a lot of content on this slide, but I'm going to sum it up a little bit. So neurodiversity refers to the natural range of difference in human brain function. But in the work context, neurodivergent is an area of diversity and inclusion that refers to alternative thinking styles. So that might be dyslexia, autism, ADHD, etc. And when we use the term neurotypical, that's more of a newer term to describe individuals of typical development, intellectual, and cognitive abilities. So next slide, please. And for today's discussion, Pratin and I are going to focus on our Autism at Work program, which is just one type of neurodiverse talent program. So at Willis Towers Watson, we believe that employing adults with autism spectrum disorder or ASD provide us with a competitive advantage. Aside from the fact that there's usually a unique skill set that can be a great fit for many of our jobs, we've had challenges to fulfill all of our open recs. And so we've really kind of focused in on this community so that we can, hire the best talent, we can invite folks with different perspectives, and that tends to lead to, natural improvement process and standards of quality. So some of the facts in this space, about 1% of the world's population has been diagnosed with autism. And in the US, about 80% of people with autism are either unemployed or underemployed. And as we look at kind of the college setup, it's estimated that about 44% of students with autism receive some type of post-secondary education. And people with autism make up about 1% to 2% of college students. So while we know that there are obstacles for people with autism and their graduation rate in the US, it should be noted that about 41% graduate with a degree. And that is compared to about 59% of the general student population. So we are seeing that they're bringing talents, they're getting education in a lot of the skills that we're looking for. So as the slide suggests, there is a whole generation of people who have been diagnosed, who are entering the workforce. And as we think about it, a lot of our companies, we're fighting for that same talent. And so we want to bring the best and the brightest talent to our organization. So awareness of autism is growing rapidly, and we know a great more deal today than, say, even 10 years ago. But unfortunately, some common held beliefs are still out there that are untrue, but they still persist. And so this lack of understanding can make it difficult for people on the autism spectrum. And so on this slide, we're going to kind of talk about how to perhaps check those misconceptions. So the next section, or the next part, thank you. So you may hear people say, oh, that person is less autistic or more autistic. And myths may include that autism is perhaps a childhood condition that might be outgrown or cured, or perhaps that autism is a mental health or behavioral disorder. Next slide. What it can actually look like is more like this. Autism is a developmental disorder, and although many people with autism do not have other conditions, some do. So some of those common conditions might be anxiety or gastrointestinal problems or speech impairments, tics, or social difficulty. And as we go to slide 3, I'd like to encourage the audience to not think of an autistic individual as less to worse, but rather as a complete person, capable of feeling a full spectrum of emotions, forming meaningful relationships and friendships, and who have talents and skills that are needed in our workplace. So we're going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Pratin.
Yep, thank you. So why hire? Why make this commitment? So I just want to spend a couple minutes just to talk about sort of the mindset in terms of expanding the workforce and leveraging this great talent, and how we can all be successful utilizing their skill sets and sort of their competencies. So I think the first and the most important thing is really in the first step of sort of the planning phase, is really to clearly align on making sure why are we motivated to do this? Do we have correct buy-in and stakeholders support and sort of sign off? I think it's really important as you go through the process before you make this sort of commitment that folks like your leadership teams, HR, human resources, the business where these colleagues might actually, perform and execute their responsibilities. I think it's really important for the organization to be on the same page, right? I think the culture and how you expand the workforce and support each other needs to be sort of a priority and a focus, right? So it's not just sort of you're just going to hire and bring these great talent in. You're going to sort of cultivate them, help them on board and be successful. So I think the first important thing obviously is, do more than just sort of talk the talk. You want to make a social impact, and you want to make the commitment to invest the time and necessary resources to achieve success ultimately. I also think it's important as an organization, in terms of their values, right? That this supports, not only just equal opportunity and accessibility, but the framework in terms of the talent cycle, and sort of when you think of the performance cycle, the competencies, the onboarding, the resources, the infrastructure that you have to make this not only a short-term commitment, but a long-term success. And then last, as you get beyond sort of steady state, the need for innovation, right? The need for continuously growing this talent, to leverage this talent, and to expand sort of the workforce. So I think it's important, going in as somebody who's passionate about this, having all the support. And when I kind of share a little bit about my business case and how we were able to be successful, it was sort of a little bit grassroots, but there were a lot of folks involved at a lot of senior levels to help sort of the process. And this was not something, there's some planning, some execution, and then some follow-up. So I think that's clearly important to have sort of a strategy and roadmap and create sort of a framework around it.
Thanks, Pratin.
Stacy's going to talk a little bit about sort of how we got started.
Yeah. So, as Pratin was mentioning, we really had the support of our CEO, and he wanted us to complete 3 pilots in 3 different countries. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the best practices of setting up the framework. And Pratin, he has been really hands-on in everything from the setting the program up, to the interview process, to the day-to-day managing of colleagues within our Autism at Work program. And so we're going to kind of talk through some of those high-level roles and pieces there. And as Pratin was mentioning, we wanted to, we would recommend, as that second bullet point is noting, is to pick the right roles and to conduct an assessment of the roles that you need to fill. We recommend that it's the roles that you select are part of your normal business as usual hiring, and not necessarily new ones or maybe one-offs. But by looking at the roles that you're executing for, you can really build some momentum into your current process. One thing that should be noted is that while any role can be considered for a program, an Autism at Work program, we found that roles that were a bit more process-oriented or data-driven can be a great fit. And so, for example, in our original pilot, we had colleagues who served as sort of seasonal data analysts who helped us with salary submission and content from our clients, and then ensuring that the data was correct and reviewing for any errors. So that job is really kind of the important piece to start with. We'd also recommend that, as you're thinking about the managers and what components that they bring, obviously they're in the day-to-day and are critical to the success. So, again, one step or framework that you'll want to build into a program like this is to have managers, your recruitment team or talent acquisition team, as well as any of the coworkers to attend perhaps an educational session prior to starting the interaction in the onboarding and recruitment phase. This just can help give a better understanding of perhaps unique communication styles or needs that autistic adults might present. And again, we're really trying to set people up to be successful in these roles. As you're thinking about, well, I might not be a subject matter expert in this space, how can I leverage external partners? And again, that's a really critical piece to identify. There are a number of third-party or employment agencies that specialize in disability hiring. Agencies can serve, as I mentioned, that subject matter expert to not only match candidates with jobs that best fit your needs, but can also provide ongoing support to the company, whether that's supporting the colleague themselves or giving managers tips and tricks. But one place to start is within your state's vocational rehabilitation agency. And so in the US, every state has its own rehab or agency, and they're a great resource to start with. So if this is a program you're interested in setting up, reach out to that organization first. But as this space has grown, and Pratin and I have really seen over the course of the last few years, that there are more and more sort of specialized boutique autistic-centric firms that are coming up that can help you set up your program or can help you match with candidates. And so, that's Pratin's going to kind of go into a little bit more detail about how we set that experience up. And then just finally, that piece around making simple adjustments with your onboarding and management process. Typical recruitment process has been, when you're looking at candidates, is to screen people out. And we would actually flip that message or that content around and say, how can we screen people in? Because sometimes that's what is the barrier, is that interview process for someone with ASD or who is autistic, that, perhaps lack of eye contact or tics or fidgets can be a barrier to making it through that interview process. And so, just thinking a little bit differently about how you manage those onboarding or management processes can really make a big difference. And, even tips around assigning a buddy or a mentor for a new colleague in part of the autistic cohort, or ensuring that accommodations are, really managed. Sometimes there might be an accommodation that's needed around sensory issues or perhaps social skills or time management. And those are not barriers that should, leave out someone from joining the workforce. Those are typically very inexpensive accommodations that can really make a big difference for the colleague that's coming on. Pratin, is there anything else that you wanted to add in sort of like getting started and thinking about that process?
Yeah, I think what's also important is to kind of get the buy-in of the culture of the office, right? I think it's really important that this is not just sort of one initiative or one person's initiative. I think it's important as a practice. And I think it's important to set the right expectations, make sure folks are on board, make sure there's different support in different areas, because I think even though the core role is consistent amongst other peers or colleagues, but there is an education that you want to provide. And I'll be honest, when I go into my example, I think that was one of my rewards out of this was, not only me and being passionate about it or being understanding more and getting to work with colleagues on the sort of autism spectrum, but getting my office on board, and which is awesome. So you kind of pumped energy into, we hire a lot of folks, sort of out of college or, this is their second job, who are excited to work with others. They like to socialize, but then, when you bring in folks who are on sort of the spectrum, you want to make sure they're respective of that. They understand the differences, but not only do they understand the differences, but they, went above and beyond to make them feel comfortable, to make them appreciate, it just like everybody was helping them. And it was awesome to see, sort of on a daily basis.
Great.
So I'm going to spend a couple minutes just to talk about sort of our strategy and our success story. And I'm really proud of this slide because it really not only set a tone for our organization, but just sort of a strategy across different lines of business and geographies at Willis Towers Watson. So to Stacy's point, we were all new. We had a commitment from the CEO to go out and expand our workforce to really look at this initiative. And I was personally responsible for the hiring, even though they were going to report into somebody sort of on my management team. But we did leverage an external partner, and we felt that was huge value to us because I wanted to make sure we did it right. I didn't want to cut any corners. I wanted to make sure that we were thorough in our sourcing and our screening and things like that. And some of these organizations have some great detail around what to look for, how to sort of approach the process, what steps to take in advance of even meeting the recruits and the candidates, what you should expect, how you should react to certain situations, how you should sort of be present. And I thought that was a huge value. So, I learned a lot using this, this external partner. So I thought that was key. In our business, which was really, to Stacy's point, focused on execution, deliverable, sort of administrative, recurring activities. When I, to be totally transparent, I knew a little bit about, sort of autism and sort of their sort of makeup and how they interact socially and things like that, but I wasn't an expert. And I learned a lot myself in terms of their strengths, their, where they excel, what type of role. And what we were focused on was, as we were growing as an organization, right? We were expanding, we're opening up new offices in New Jersey and in other cities. And we had a need to continuously hire in advance of the work. So, there was a lot of pressure on bringing in lots of folks in a short period of time and how we can be successful. So as sort of these initiatives lined up, it was great to kind of take this venture and to be able to do this. So, it was really awesome in the sense that, we were so focused on this, right? We were really focused on how we can be successful and how, we can bring in the right folks and not only for us to be successful, for them to be successful. So the attention to detail, how they're focused on the work, their efficiencies, how they're so, in trust and integrity, always on time, and just some of the natural characteristics of these candidates were just so impressive, and it tied directly into our, Willis Towers Watson corporate values, which was important. But then when we got to sort of training and seeing them in action and being able to sort of shadow them and work side by side, the results were phenomenal in terms of exceeding expectations, right? And our work is very task oriented around processes, files, exports, procedures, right? So not to get to sort of some of the tactical stuff, but right away we saw increased accuracy of output. In other words, direct correlation to, obviously if we don't do something right, we pay penalties and we have to put fees at risk, and not to get into the business side, but we drastically saw a reduction in that for these clients and projects that these colleagues were focused on. Process time, right? We saw a natural increase of almost 20 to 30% in processing time because they were so focused of how, thorough they were and how they checked everything and caught issues in advance of, what we call production errors and things like that. But I think what was more impressive is we compared these clients to our entire book of business, and we're able to apply these efficiencies for folks who were just, not on the spectrum and not part of this neurodiverse talent. So not only did we help those particular clients they supported, we impacted our broader book of business, which was awesome, around automation and opportunities to streamline the work. Year 2, year 3, as we continuously grew and supported these colleagues, I think one of the things that was really important is we grew their skill set, right? So not only were we content, because we weren't on just performing the initial set of activities or steps or deliverables, we were growing them. We're giving them more complex activities. We're bringing them into the entire talent lifecycle, right? So, reward, recognition, bonus, compensation increases, right? Giving them mid-year feedback reviews, or focusing on individual development plans, right? We're truly making sure that we create a framework that is not only consistent across all of our colleagues, but even more seeing them grow is sort of a passion of ours and something that we're committed to. I think that one of the things is a misconception is sometimes the nervousness, or sometimes the sort of the conservative approach. We actually, some of our colleagues now sort of I wouldn't say lead, but attend and participate in client meetings, right? Some of our clients are Fortune 100 companies who had consistent sort of objectives from an I&D perspective and a talent pool. We now have these folks in meetings, and they're so passionate about the work, and our clients love that we can have these sort of integrated teams that aren't just focused on gender or ethnic backgrounds and things like that. I mean, we truly bring a diverse workforce. And now we've expanded their roles to handle multiple projects. So, before it was more of a sort of, to be totally transparent, a sort of a narrow focus and project based. But now it's more of a broad practice base where, they can handle multiple projects, work on multiple things, and overall be very successful. So, this is a true sort of business case study that has yielded tremendous success and is sort of what I would consider the baseline or pilot for expanding this throughout other businesses at Willis Towers Watson. So I think the other thing is around just some of the things I think was important to sort of what do we learn, right? What are some of the tips and lessons learned? And as we continuously evolve and learn and expand, I think it's important to understand sort of, what are some of the things that you might come across, right? So, I think it's important, nothing about us without us, right? So, I think this is the whole sort of mindset around, expanding, having an open sort of framework, right? Sort of a billboard of just understanding, focus on it, right? Leverage your resources, right? Whether it's the workability group, disability. I mean, I think one of the great things about Willis Towers Watson is, we have a group of folks who are phenomenal at this and understand all of this and really help the business, right? Because sometimes the business is really sort of not matured enough to understand how these great resources and talent pool can support them. So important to understand and leverage all the folks around you to be successful. Transparency is important, right? Communicate to be explicit and specific, right? I think it's important that, there are opportunities, I mean, throughout our process where things maybe didn't go right. There were some bumps, some processing things that we needed to kind of tweak and things like that. Just be open and be honest. And I think they appreciate that. We appreciate that. And ultimately it will sort of result in tremendous success. I think the important point here on this slide is around flexibility. Last year with the pandemic and COVID, this role or these resources across all of our businesses were, in the office 5 days a week, right? It was sort of a hands-on in the office, leverage your resources, the people that sit around you and work together, bounce ideas, problems, situations, things like that. With COVID, we went to 100% virtual, literally on the fly, right? So think about, not only these candidates, but our entire workforce, but specifically the folks we're talking about today, going in from 5 days a week in the office, having support to literally being at home, logging on virtually and being able to execute the same job. So, you have to leverage, support tools around wellness and EAP and things like that, just so in case they need those type of, references and resources and tools, but their job, right? Making sure that manager can still connect with them, make sure they can still answer questions, make sure the support is there. And honestly, we haven't skipped a beat. Resources and colleagues are performing exceptionally well and continuously, for the majority of time, meeting and exceeding expectations. And I think the other thing is at the end of the day, it's all about making sure, they understand how important they are, make sure they're recognized and rewarded. And, we don't treat them differently. We provide them the same type of, sort of infrastructure from a comp perspective, from acknowledgement, reward, sort of all the different kudos and all of those things that we do, because that's just as important to them as everybody else. Sometimes you might think, they don't reciprocate or appreciate it, but they do. I mean, we have really made strides, and because it's of our commitment, not only from, my team or my management staff or the managers in my group, but just the practice itself. So really, really awesome to make sure they feel appreciated like everybody else. Stacy, you want to talk about a couple of quick resources?
Yes. Anna, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, we're out of time, but if you could really quickly give us the rundown on these resources, we will move on.
Absolutely. So there is a fantastic roundtable that any company can join if they're interested in setting up a neurodiversity program at their company. It's Autism at Work Employer Roundtable. It's part of disabilityin.org. It's companies like Willis Towers Watson, Microsoft, SAP, all are a part of this roundtable. And it's really we share a lot of information with each other about how to improve and give better experiences for autistic colleagues. They've got a playbook, if you're interested in really kind of digging deep into this content, a 69-page playbook of every step you can take to set up an Autism at Work program in your company. And then also the Jan Workplace. If you aren't familiar with Jan, this is a fantastic website. It's got a ton of workplace accommodation information, but this is a section specifically on autism at work. And I'd highly recommend just perusing Jan for a number of things. So it's askjan.org is the key site that you want to hit.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible, and I think that you need a bigger platform to talk about it because it's such an important issue, and I don't think it gets enough attention. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. we are moving on to our next session. It's a little bit of a sprint here again. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Take care.